Paternal indignation echoed throughout the house like a hurricane, leaving traces of disarray in its wake. Liam, tired from his unsuccessful attempt to find something edible in the refrigerator, fixed his gaze on Leyla as if everything that could calm his empty feeling of hunger depended on her. The oppressive silence hung in the air, as if waiting for a push to transform into a storm of words and emotions. "Darling, you know it was dinner. I tried to prepare something filling for everyone." Leyla helplessly tried to diffuse the conflict. She looked at him hopefully, wishing that at least one of her arguments would break through the wall of his dissatisfaction. "And what kind of dinner is it without a proper piece of meat?" Liam insisted, his voice tinged with discontent and disappointment. "I work too. I also contribute to the family's finances, and this is what I get in return." Leyla felt her heart beating faster. She mentally prepared herself for the battle that ensued every time the month ended. Her tired eyes scanned the room, sensing the heaviness in every corner, every object, as if they were witnesses to their marital discord. "Liam, we always find a way out of this situation," she whispered softly, trying not to succumb to panic. She knew that time and time again, this was a challenging test for their family. There was a moment of tense silence, as if time had frozen, anticipating how this argument would escalate. Layla's eyes roamed the walls of the room, as if seeking support. But inside, her eyes dampened with tears, preparing for a new wave of disagreements. "Liam, please don't start," she began, but was ruthlessly interrupted by her husband. "Are you really going to repeat the same thing again? When will you finally understand what needs to be done?" he yelled, desperation and disappointment evident in his voice. Leyla felt her knees weaken, pressing herself against the wall as if seeking support. It was the cursed dilemma in which they were stuck. She wanted to block her ears, to escape, but she was chained to this place, to this conversation that always ended with the same accusation. "We've discussed this so many times," she helplessly uttered, but her words drowned in the depths of his irritation. "The same old story all the time. I'm tired. I need support, not constant words," Liam sharply retorted. Leyla flinched in surprise. Her heart pounded even harder, as if she was trying to break free from this situation. She stared into his eyes, their sincerity clouded by misunderstanding and hurt. Leyla was taken aback, gesturing as if trying to shield herself from the heated words that struck her to the core. "Please, just think, how is it even possible? I want to work, but the situation with the kids. I can't leave them alone, especially the younger ones. Dealing with the older ones isn't easy either." Bitterness pierced every word. She was dismayed and hurt by his lack of understanding. "Yes, others manage without nannies or help from relatives, but we don't have that option. We're on our own." Her voice sounded mixed, genuinely bewildered and slightly accusatory. She felt tears welling up, but she clenched her teeth, refusing to show weakness. "You know that my parents are elderly and in poor health. They can't handle the kids, and your parents have their own affairs. Don't put everything on someone else's shoulders," she continued quietly and stubbornly, feeling each word intensify her inner struggle. Her husband's words about the fear of being indebted to someone else hit her as if an invisible hand had struck her heart hard. She froze in place, her hands, damp from water, unexpectedly stilled. Leyla felt as though instead of tears on her cheeks, there were only searing traces of words. Our children," she whispered, barely containing a wave of emotions. "You wanted them too, you did." The bitterness in her voice carried mixed feelings of love, hurt, and helplessness. Leyla stood frozen, as if a sudden blow had left her breathless. Her husband's words struck the deepest corner of her soul, making her heart quiver with hurt and disappointment. These words were new, threatening, like a powerful strike at the very foundation of their family union. He had never risen to such heights of insult and accusation before. "What are you saying, Liam?" she whispered, her voice sounding feeble, as if it trembled within her soul. This was an unprecedented turn. Liam had never been so harsh in his words before. He knew how she cared for the children, how meticulously and devotedly she embraced her role as a mother. "You have nothing to do with our children," she repeated in a whisper, feeling something inside her break. It was a blow to her self-worth, a hit to their family values. It seemed like Liam could read her thoughts, understanding how his words wounded her. He was resolute, as if ready to resolve this issue here and now. "You use the children too much to cover up your shortcomings," he said with cold certainty. "I've worked all day, and what about you? Hasn't anyone stopped by?" These words, like invisible wedges, pierced Layla's heart, leaving behind blinding pain and disappointment. She met his gaze in silence, experiencing weakness in her knees and indescribable pain within. Leyla felt reality shattering under the weight of accusations. Despite the tears, she staggered, paying little attention to her surroundings, and rushed out of the kitchen, barely noticing the way to reach the children's room. Matteo, usually watchful over the younger ones, stared at his mother, his usually cheerful face expressing deep seriousness. "Mom, what happened?" he asked, causing genuine concern with his unusually mature tone. "Everything's fine, sweetie," Leyla hurried to reassure him, aware of her confusion. She tried to conceal her tears, timidly wiping them away. The boy looked intently into his mother's eyes, then glanced at the younger ones. He nodded slowly, as if deciding that his mom didn't want to worry the children. Leyla didn't try to persuade him otherwise. She quietly left the room, closing the door behind her. She hoped that the next day, Matteo would have plenty to do, and he wouldn't revisit this unfortunate moment. Engulfed in a storm of emotions, Leyla felt her pain becoming overwhelming and unbearable. Their apartment felt cramped. Every corner reminded her of the troubled state of their family relationships. Right now, she didn't want to see her husband, especially because she sensed that he wasn't going to easily back down from his accusations and dialogue. Despite the late hour, she had no choice but to leave the apartment. She understood that leaving the children practically alone wasn't the best decision, but in her current state, she couldn't interact adequately with them. It seemed to her that her presence or absence didn't matter. Matteo would still take care of the younger ones. The certainty of her son's responsibility and care brought her some relief, however small. Leyla wandered the streets, almost oblivious to her surroundings, as if lost in the realm of her thoughts. The downpour had begun, but she paid no attention to it. Questions swirled in her mind, ones she couldn't find answers to. How had her youthful love turned into what was happening now? How could her husband openly accuse her of infidelity without any evidence? These questions haunted her mind like restless demons, denying her any peace. Recalling her past, Leyla revisited the pages of her university years at the prestigious economics faculty of the country's top university. In her memories, Liam appeared as a young, ambitious entrepreneur with grand plans. Their relationship seemed like a true romantic idyll, filled with attention, lavish dinners, countless gifts, and enormous bouquets of flowers. But somewhere along the way, they found themselves in a situation neither of them could foresee. It all started when Liam persistently urged his future wife to leave her studies at the institute. "What do you need it for? My income will be enough for both of us. You just need to stay home and take care of household chores," he insisted. At first, Leyla dismissed the idea entirely. She had grown up in an orphanage and had every chance to fall into the deepest abyss, but persistence and luck helped her escape from that difficult situation. She made enormous efforts to establish herself in the new world she found herself in. But ultimately, Liam managed to convince her that this new world wasn't going anywhere. Initially, when Leyla and Liam were together, they enjoyed tranquility. According to Liam's plan, she took care of the daily chores while he delved into his entrepreneurial pursuits. They had an abundance of finances, but unfortunately, they failed to save. Desires to acquire something excessive but pleasant right now always emerged. "It seems neither of us considered the need to save. In case of anything, my parents will be able to help," Liam would assert to his young wife every time the topic of their financial future arose. However, for Leyla, it remained a mystery whether this statement was true or just a ploy. Both of them believed that a critical situation would never arise. However, after some time, something strange happened with Liam's business. Leyla didn't have full clarity on the details, but she noticed that his income started decreasing until his enterprise finally faced a complete catastrophe, crumbling to the ground. Suddenly, it emerged that Liam's parents refused to help the young family. "We still have younger children who can't provide for themselves, and you are a grown man, solve your own problems," his father sternly declared. This news was shocking for Liam, who had expected support from his parents in this difficult moment. The necessity to sell their luxurious spacious apartment, where they used to live, and move to a modest two-bedroom residence on the outskirts of the city was a tough trial for them. Liam seemed visibly dissatisfied with the new situation. His discontent was evident, possibly influenced by the luxury he was accustomed to, affecting his attitude towards this change. On the other hand, Leyla embraced this upheaval with philosophical calmness. She had long emerged from poverty but remembered those difficult times. Thanks to that experience, she was better prepared for hardships and knew how to act in challenging circumstances. Her wisdom and composure helped them adapt to the new life and cope with the challenges they had to face. Leyla quickly found a job as a saleswoman in a store, despite the modest salary. For her, it was a better option than remaining unemployed. Liam, on the other hand, took a different path, plunging into heavy drinking, getting lost in the turbulent whirlpool of alcohol. Despite the difficulties, Leyla didn't blame her husband and tried to support him. Her efforts bore fruit, and at one point, Liam stopped drinking and began nurturing new ideas for his business. These ideas became the foundation for the family to restore their former prosperity and wealth. However, Liam's ideas constantly failed him. Even if he managed to gather the initial capital for launching a new venture, various difficulties soon emerged, shattering all his plans. Over time, the man's character became increasingly unbearable, and his constant failures only intensified the tension within the family. "I don't have enough money for a full realization of my projects," Liam admitted candidly to Leyla. "But what can I do, dear?" she replied. "I already take all possible extra shifts, work practically without weekends. There just isn't any more time I can find for earning. Of course, if I had finished university, it would have been easier, but can't lament the past now, can we? This must be a lesson for both of us. I need to finish my education and find a proper job. But these are plans for the future once we get out of. But how are we going to do it?" her husband complained. "Well, to increase our income," Leyla gently retorted, "you could find some additional work, even if it's just for half a day." "I don't have time for that," Liam asserted categorically. "If you haven't noticed, while you're working for peanuts, I'm trying to rebuild the business and restore our previous life, but you're not helping me with that." "But I'm doing everything I can," Leyla replied, surprised. "No, you haven't done one crucial thing," her husband retorted, "even though I explained to you how important it is for both me and yourself. Darling, perhaps you're overlooking the fact that even though I don't have a complete education, I still studied economics. The proposal you're suggesting seems too risky to me. Maybe it's worth trusting me in matters where I have understanding." "It's just that you doubt my abilities," Leyla responded hesitantly. "Do you think that just because I made a mistake, it means I'll keep repeating them? I won't be able to achieve anything good anymore," Liam sadly remarked. As a result of such discussions, Leyla constantly tried to persuade her husband that he was wrong and that she should be trusted more in matters where she had competence. However, all these conversations yielded no results and soon began anew. Liam proposed a simple solution: to take out a large loan in Leila's name and invest the money in the business, since he, being bankrupt and officially unemployed, had no chance of getting a loan from the bank himself. But Leyla staunchly refused this idea, fearing it would only deepen their financial troubles. She insisted that he consider ways to repay the loan in case of failure. Leyla was convinced it would only compound their problems and didn't yield to her husband's persuasions. Then came a time when Leyla became pregnant, and Liam had to set aside his business plans to find a job and provide for the family. It wasn't in line with his desires, but both spouses believed it was a temporary measure. Leyla planned to return to work when the child entered daycare, but she found out there were no available spots, so she couldn't return to work as soon as they had planned. When Mateo turned 3 years old and Leyla became pregnant for the second time, the situation only worsened. 2 children were born, and only then did Liam start talking about how it would be beneficial for her to return to work. Strolling through the familiar streets in the night silence, Leyla was immersed in her heavy thoughts and memories. The neighborhood, which had become almost familiar to her over the years, was on the outskirts of the city but was considered safe, so even at such a late hour, moving around was secure. However, Leyla, tormented by conflicts with her husband and overwhelmed by the family situation, felt emotionally distant from the sense of safety. On this night, as her musings grew deeper, something unusual caught her attention. Leyla, preoccupied with her own problems, initially didn't immediately grasp what disrupted her peace. An undefined anxiety awakened in her subconscious, as if a neon sign had lit up somewhere, heralding something out of the ordinary in the surrounding space. Distracted from her thoughts, Leyla glanced around and quickly discovered the cause of her unease. Sitting on the curb was a little girl, the same age as her son Mateo, dressed in a smart pink dress. The girl curiously examined the asphalt beneath her feet, surrounded by silence and seclusion. In this neighborhood, Leyla rarely encountered homeless children, especially at such a late hour. It was predominantly inhabited by decent families who didn't allow their children to roam the streets alone at night. Moreover, the girl didn't look like a street urchin. Her entirely new, clean, and fashionable clothing did not fit the typical appearance of homeless youngsters. This unexpected incident greatly surprised Leyla, yet at that moment, all these details seemed secondary to her. Full realization came much later when she recalled this strange encounter. At that moment, her primary concern was to assist the child who was left alone on the street at such a late hour, and therefore potentially in danger. Following this thought, she cautiously approached the girl, crouching down to establish eye-level contact. She tried to speak softly and amiably, initiating the conversation with a question, "Hi, what's your name?" The girl calmly replied, "I don't remember." This astonished Leyla. "Do you know who your parents are and where they are?" She continued. "I don't remember, I have no memories," the girl replied. Leyla tried to inquire further, "What do you remember, then?" But the girl just silently shook her head. "How did you end up here?" Leyla asked. "I don't remember, I just woke up there," the girl replied indifferently, gesturing towards where she came from. "Was there a forest or a park?" Leyla continued inquiring. "I don't remember, I just woke up and don't remember anything, I just walked and got tired," the girl answered. All this unusual situation troubled Leyla and she felt unsure. After a short pause, she asked, "Are you hungry?" The girl nodded eagerly, indicating that she hadn't eaten for a long time. "Okay, let's go to my place," Leyla said. "I'll make you some food, and then you can spend the night at my house with my children. In the morning, we'll figure out what to do next. And to make it easier, let's pretend your name is Mila. Would that be more comfortable for you?" The girl indifferently replied, "Yes." Thus, Leyla decided to temporarily help the girl, and invited her to spend the night at her home with her children to sort out the situation in the morning. Leyla firmly grabbed the girl's hand and headed towards her home. All her personal concerns and problems instantly took a back seat. This was how her inner self operated. If someone needed help, her own difficulties moved to the background. This was especially evident in her as a mother. The situation with the homeless child who couldn't even remember her name tore at her soul. When they safely reached her apartment, the clock showed around 2 in the morning. To her surprise, all the family members were peacefully asleep in their beds. Inside Leyla, a strange feeling of resentment stirred. No one in her family had been concerned about where she was at such a late hour. Nevertheless, she understood that this situation couldn't possibly please her family. Explaining to the children, and especially to her husband, why the girl was at Leyla's apartment and how she got there was unacceptable. Quietly, she headed to the kitchen, took out leftovers from dinner in the refrigerator, and fed the girl. After the girl had eaten and began yawning desperately, a clear sign of exhaustion from not only not eating for a long time but also not sleeping for an extended period, Leyla decided to arrange her on the couch while she herself prepared to lie on the floor. Today had been so exhausting that she felt the weariness settling in and soon fell asleep carelessly, forgetting to set her alarm. Usually, she was the first one up in the family, preparing breakfast, seeing her husband off to work, and getting her eldest son ready for school. Leyla was an early riser, accustomed to it, finding not only comfort but satisfaction in it. However, waking up without an alarm in such circumstances proved exceedingly difficult. Leyla was jolted awake by a sharp shake on her shoulder. Lifting her eyes, she saw Liam's irritated face. "I'm running late for work," he exclaimed, noticing her lying on the kitchen floor. "Breakfast isn't ready. You're still sleeping, and not even in bed but on the kitchen floor. And who's the girl snoring on our couch?" At first, Leyla didn't even realize who he was referring to, but then remembered her nocturnal adventure and attempted to explain. He listened to her with a rather skeptical expression. "By the time I come back from work, Mila shouldn't be in our house anymore," Liam declared and hurried off to work without even glancing at the kitchen. Leyla tried to collect herself, but even this simple act proved elusive for her. After a few minutes, she realized that her husband probably hadn't bothered to wake up Mateo, let alone take him to school. The little one was peacefully asleep in his crib, and Leyla realized that if Liam was already late for work, it was high time for Mateo to leave the house. For the first time that morning, glancing at the clock, she grabbed her head in horror. Her son's first lesson was starting in 10 minutes. Waking up Mateo, she quickly prepared a simple breakfast for him and sent him off to class. Luckily, the school was nearby, and the boy could manage this journey independently. But Leyla knew he would still be late. It heralded problems that could also affect her. However, at that moment, she didn't plan to dwell on that as other immediate difficulties lay ahead. Fortunately, all the noise and hustle in the house over the last half hour hadn't disturbed Mila's peaceful sleep. Her rescuer decided to wait, preferring the girl to wake up on her own, occupied with her own children, contemplating the steps to be taken. The girl only got up 2 hours later, by which time Leyla had already devised a clear plan of action. It was time for a walk with the little ones, and she decided to take Mila along to visit the nearest police station. After all, law enforcement agencies existed precisely to investigate such cases. "So, you found this girl on the street last night?" the officer at the station clarified, Exactly, confirmed Leyla. However, she wasn't entirely clear about the purpose. She had already recounted the whole story and filed a report. Nevertheless, the police officer seemed to reconfirm what had already been thoroughly explained. Why didn't you contact the police immediately? The policeman asked in surprise. I was very tired, and it just didn't occur to me that this was what I needed to do, replied Leyla. Mila seemed oblivious to the current situation or didn't attach much importance to it, engrossed in examining the room, although, in Leila's opinion, there was nothing particularly engaging or even beautiful about it. What are you planning to do with this child? Asked the policeman. What do you mean? Leila was surprised. This question caught her off guard. She sincerely believed that the girl's fate was now in the hands of law enforcement. We can place her in a special institution or let her stay with you for now, the officer replied indifferently. Leila's vision darkened. The choice they presented to her was unbearable.